What is up, everybody? Welcome to Behind the Cork. I'm your host, Eric Rocha. My guest today is Jordan Bowers. You can find him on Twitter and on Instagram at CINEJORDAN. In this episode, we talk movies. It's funny, I grew up watching all kinds of TV and film, and I thought I knew a lot about film, but then I met Jordan and I realized I do know a lot, but I don't know shit compared to what a lot of other people do. Jordan, I love this guy because he's incredibly articulate, very live and let live, mind your own fucking business. We need more people like that. And he's a great, funny guy. And it was fun to sit down and just kind of pick his brain about not only film, but just about the nature of what's going on today in terms of comedy. I'll be honest with you, this episode was recorded a while back, but it's just as relevant now. It's funny as I listen to it. I loved this interview. It's a really good interview. We come from different walks of life, but again, what I love about my friends is, and especially the show, that's okay. You don't have to agree with fucking everything. God, it feels like there's a lot of shit like... Anyways, I'm not going to get into that. I love Jordan, and I think you're going to love him too. If not, well, this is free, so fucking you get what you pay for. What do you want from me? But before that, I want to say this to the first responders, to the nurses, and everybody working out there. Keep fighting. I know it's daunting at times because I work in healthcare too. I certainly had my panic attacks and all that shit. But keep fighting. That's all we can do. And I respect the shit out of all of you. You really are out there saving lives. And that's a noble thing. It's a noble thing, and someday this will be over. Things will go back to normal. And after they get back to normal, well, you know what's going to happen then.
Hey, everybody, we're all going to get laid.
I don't know no better, so let's blame the weather, 'cause I got no care when I hit my groove. 'Cause I got no care when I hit my groove. Well, my music's rolling, I'm moving to that kick and swing, and I press it.
Yeah, I didn't realize coming out here I was going to be having like my own Nom flashbacks. I used to live Burbank and Kester.
Okay,
And,
wow.
and then before that, I was Burbank and Sepulveda up at those, what do they call them? The fucking Oasis.
Yeah.
The Oasis in a fucking sadist nightmare, maybe. Right across from the Best Western.
So, yeah, because it's funny because everybody's got a history with the Valley somehow. Like Luke used to deliver mail.
Yeah, and I didn't know him back then, but yeah, I've heard those stories. I know Mr. T. He always talks about delivering Mr. T's mail.
God knows what he fucking bothered Mr. T with. Just imagine the gangly the mailman with the fucked up teeth just waiting for you.
I paid myself.
You no good, Mr. T. You no good.
Oh.
Just Luke on a ladder like Belushi trying to look over his hedges. Is he in there? Is he in there? Fuck.
Yeah.
So, thank you very much, my guest, Jordan Bowers. I met you through Luke Allen, comedian Luke Allen. Mm-hmm. Trying to think of exactly when. When did we meet?
In person for the first time, it was at, he had that housewarming thing that is not a house. It was that apartment that he lived in before this last one, before he just moved again. Whatever one he lived in out in, it was like off of Venice or something like that. I think I saw you there that night. And then it was probably a while again before I saw you again.
Because I remember hearing about you before I actually met you.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, no, I heard about you a lot also when he was making the rounds doing mics and stuff, and then your name started to crop up.
and it was interesting because just in hearing about you, because I think your name came up because Luke and I would talk politics, and we would argue politics, and what it was is like one of us would get drunk and start
Sure.
start trying to change the other one's mind.
Which always works out so well for everyone involved.
Which I think is how we have a two-party system.
That's right.
We just never stopped it.
That's right.
Really
I mean,
why?
that's all Reagan and Tip O'Neill did throughout fucking 80 to 88.
No, but this is what's uniquely fascinating about you is you are one of the ultimate movie buffs. And it's funny because I thought I knew a lot about movies. And then I met Luke and I'm like, holy fuck, he knows even more about movies. And then I met you and I'm like, holy fuck, he knows even more. It's like,
Yeah.
I don't know who you idolize, but they need to be stopped.
I just met this guy. I just trained this guy who's he's starting at our office in Singapore, and he is a true encyclopedia of world film. And I'm pretty. I mean, I can go pretty deep on a lot of things. I mean, I can't go Tarantino deep, but I can go pretty deep on a lot of different subjects. Like I could probably talk relatively intelligently about, different eras of like Japanese film or just picking various regions and stuff. Mexican film from the mid 2000s and stuff. I could do that.
Yeah.
But this guy is just like, I mean, I think I threw out maybe over the course of 2 days, I threw out like 2 or 3 titles at him that he hadn't seen. And he definitely threw several out at me that I hadn't seen. So just talking to him, he was very like, you instantly knew. And it wasn't like fake. It wasn't like posturing like film school guy. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, he really is like he ran like a festival, and he started up like film societies over there in Singapore and stuff like that. Like he's one of, I mean, what does that mean exactly? I don't know, but nevertheless, like he did it. Like I didn't do that.
Yeah,
so.
I mean, and that does count for something though if you're that organized.
Yeah,
to
no, exactly.
Even do that.
And especially, we forget how much access we have here. Even before streaming was happening and the thing, like it's so much more easier now even to access a lot of content. But like even before that, we had so much access for whether it was like if you're in a big city, especially whether you had like theaters that catered to that kind of stuff, which I didn't have the benefit of growing up. But if you had a deep movie store where they really like they rented stuff that you could, even in the DVD era, if you could get like VHS tapes of these old stuff that you wouldn't be able to find anyplace else like that. I mean, you don't have that anywhere else. Like it was only in the United States could you really go deep on that kind of thing, and could film be a really like academic pursuit for a larger population of people, whereas it was much more narrow for pretty much any other country you went to.
I think what's interesting about it too, like I know Eddie Brandt's here. Eddie Brandt's is it's on is it on Vineland?
Right.
It's here I love those guys because they were about in their own small way preserving the cassettes that they had, because all of the stuff that they had, they were like, oh, we make DVDs of it too.
Yeah.
'Cause I remember, I don't know if they can get in trouble for this. I think anybody that could is dead, but that's the nice thing about being a really deep cinema fan. I wanted Peter Brook's King Lear with Paul Scofield, and it was Royal Shakespeare shit. And they were like, hey, do you want a DVD of that? Because that's hard to find. And I was like, fuck yeah. I was like, I'll give you guys $50 for this. And they were like, just 20. And I was like, holy fuck. And they did, man. It was great. I got to show it to people, and I was like, that's so important.
Yeah.
To have that, especially because in their own small way, they are trying to preserve that shit for people like me and us.
Yeah. It's because I mean, as ubiquitous as streaming has gotten, all these companies still have to cater to people. They have to cater to an audience. So if the audience isn't big enough, there's no incentive for them to carry some of these titles. So we're still at the point where you can't see everything yet. And I used to do that. I had I still have it. It's sitting in a closet. I haven't used it in years, obviously. But I used to rip VHS tapes onto blank DVDs when I was in college, because we had one of those kind of that like reserve section of the movie store kind of places in this town next to mine, where that just really deep cuts of stuff where like you had to put like deposits down because they were so rare. They're like, we can't fucking like I'm terrified to give this to anybody. So like that kind of thing. And so I used to do that. I remember a guy I worked with at an old job. He gave me and I can't remember the name off the top of my head right now. I'll have to go look. I have it in a binder someplace. He gave me a very rare copy of some really truly ghastly like Nazi sexploitation film from the 70s. This is like really, really, really heinous. And I don't even want to watch it again, but like it's just so rare that like I ripped it onto a DVD just because like I don't know, and I don't, there might be that off chance like this comes up in conversation again and be like, oh, have I got a surprise for you? Like, so just to have it was kind of interesting.
Did you take your lady and see like, yeah, my friend collects all this Nazi shit?
Yeah.
His mother's like, I'm sorry for the way things look around here.
Wear a raincoat. Yeah, I did that a lot. And when I was a kid, I used to, before DVDs, you couldn't, I don't know if you remember this or not, a lot of people would do like VCR to VCRs, but then they eventually put this like, I don't even know how the technology worked exactly, but they put some kind of fucking like plastic piece in the VHS tape. So then when you did that, it like fuzzed out all of the picture and it looked really bad. Well, what I figured out was, because we used to have a little, my dad's company gave him this little TV. It was like a 3-inch screen, and it weighed about fucking 60 pounds. This little, like a cinder block size, like TV. And it wasn't literally that heavy, but I mean, it was just this big, very outdated piece of technology now where it ripped onto little, like, some kind of tapes, high 8 tapes or something like that. So we would record VHS tapes onto these little high 8 tapes. So for like road trips and stuff, when we would like take summer vacations, we'd watch on this tiny little 3-inch TV. And then it got on, I was like, wait a minute, what if I went back from the high 8 onto a blank VHS? I wonder if I would have that same problem. Turns out I didn't. I could get the picture. I mean, it wasn't perfect, but like I could get the picture pretty close to how it should look. And so I started going from the VHS to the high 8, and then, or whatever they were called, and then back to a VHS tape again. So we just had hundreds and hundreds of VHS tapes. I usually put like 3 movies to a tape or something like that.
Oh, yeah.
Depending on how much tape it had in it, So we just had rows and rows and rows, and I had them all organized into a like an alphabetized spreadsheet, because it's like it was possible to keep track of everything. Yeah. So one day my mom just started, she's like, well, you should really type all these out and like make a catalog of them. So we did that and started, and then as we added on, just kept on growing and growing the spreadsheet. So those days are over with. Still have a lot of those tapes at my parents' house. I brought a few back at Christmas time, and I'm going to kind of, as trips out there, I'm going to slowly bring more and more of not the recorded ones. We got rid of those a while ago, but like the tapes we actually bought, which were so many. I'm trying to hang on to a few of those just for like, I know some people collect them for, I don't know, whatever, like hipster reasons or something, but like I really do, so much of my life and my childhood I can associate back to seeing so many of these movies for the first time. Like I remember getting the Alien trilogy when it was still only a trilogy. So getting the Alien trilogy 3 VHS box set for Christmas from Santa Claus. It's like as if he made that in his toy shop.
More blood.
So stuff like that, or the copy of the Tim Burton Batman we gave my dad for Christmas. Back in whenever that tape would have come out, it probably would have came out in like 19. It took forever for shit to come out on home video. I mean, that movie came out in '89, but I bet you that tape probably didn't come out until at least late 90 or more. I mean, it took a long time.
I remember thinking that with Batman Returns. Mm-hmm. But it's interesting too, because oh god, I always think of this whenever Alien comes up. I'm always jealous of people that got to see Alien in the theater before.
I've said the exact same thing.
Anybody knew what the fuck that was, because it's so. it's perfect. It was interesting when do you remember when, oh God, was it IFC or who the fuck did it? They did the 100 scariest movies of all time. And it was Alien actually knocked The Exorcist out of first place.
Right.
And because everybody had always said, oh, The Exorcist, The Exorcist. And then these guys were like, actually, when we talked to the directors and other respected cinema people, they said it's Alien.
Yeah.
Which, I don't know. It's funny because I think with Alien, yes, just because you start to feel claustrophobic.
It's a haunted house movie.
All the shit that they wanted you to do.
Yeah.
And then, obviously, The Exorcist. One, you're comparing, which I think is a fruitless endeavor. But
yeah, I mean, it's arbitrary, but...
I mean, I remember watching The Exorcist and wanting to read the book and reading the book and just being like, this is really good. Like, both are really good extensions of each other when you think about it. Because to me, nothing can top Max von Sydow when he does the "I cast you" when he really, I mean, just turns it on and he's pissed.
It's a great performance,
isn't it? Though, and
it's a really
all
great
around. I mean, Kinderman,
and there's a lot of quiet moments in that movie that are really affecting. Yeah. It's the Alien follows a lot of the kind of the haunted house tropes, except instead of a house, it's a spaceship, but it's all kind of basically the same thing. And also it follows that Psycho format of, I mean, if now we all know Ripley is the lead, but you don't know that going into that movie for the first time, right? So they're the John Hurt dying in the way he does, then of course Tom Skerritt Tom Skerritt gets killed off before half the cast is left. So yeah, it was really interesting in that way. The Exorcist is terrifying. I wasn't raised religious at all, and I'm not religious at all, but it's terrifying because of the familiarity of it, the sense of somebody close to you who's out of control and that you can't help and can't do anything about. Mm-hmm. It's kind of in the same way of like Rosemary's Baby. Has a similar, like, real dread to it, where, like, the person she's supposed to be able to trust most has actually betrayed her in, like, the most heinous way possible.
Oh, God.
Like, gave up her womb to the devil. I mean, that's, Jesus Christ. I mean, it's just horrifying to think about.
You think about those moments, too, especially when you watch it now, and I laugh. This is no dream. This is real.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, what? And I remember laughing, like, oh, God, like, I wonder what I would say if I were being fucked by the devil. Probably something along those lines.
I made a poor life decision somewhere. This was not the left turn I wanted to make. Yeah.
But it is, like, I remember thinking, too, just the twist, the paradox of a sweet little girl, just being turned into this heinous, macabre fucking entity that you're like, what the fuck is this thing? And there's that beautiful moment when they're on the steps, and you know exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
When he says, why this girl? Because the whole part of it is the crisis of faith and all that good stuff, and to make us think that humanity's ugly. It's a beautiful, and it doesn't preach it at you.
No,
it's so earned.
Yeah,
where you're like, holy fuck.
My parents' friend, they tell the story of they went and saw it when they were probably they would have been like 20 or something when it came out, I remember. I mean, he had nightmares for a month. A grown man had nightmares for a month after watching this movie. These aren't like, myths or legends, like people actually passing out in the theater and things like that.
Insane.
And a lot of it is sort of like, how were people weren't, what could people have been really desensitized with before that, right? But I mean, really, there were things, because these things build over time. I mean, there were like Psycho was a dozen plus years before that movie, and Psycho did similar kind of things where, I mean, it really rattled people, and like now it's quite tame in just terms of like how graphic it is and stuff like that. But again, I mean, these things really had such a profound effect, and we kind of live in this age where it's so easy to access everything and to see like the worst. If you want to see it, like, you can just go see the worst, and you can see actual life worst kind of things on the internet. So it seems, and people seem to kind of relish in how much they're not shocked or not bothered by things. It's just kind of important. Like, I think you have to a little bit if you're a real movie person, like you really respect the art and the craft of it, you kind of have to give yourself over to this stuff and look at it in a way of not simply as like, oh, did this make me jump? Is this making me sweat? Does this make me nervous? Like really look at like what the core. Like that's why I always say Rosemary's Baby is one of the most terrifying movies. It's not because I was like gripping my seat the entire time or like closing my eyes while I was watching. It's like, just think about that. Think about the person you love the most and you trust the most that you've chosen to spend the rest of your life with, and look what they did. Look what he did with that trust and that love. He took her trust and her love, and he implanted the Antichrist inside of her with it. That's what he did.
And it's funny because the whole film, there is something off. Mm-hmm. There's just it's like it's a minor note in a song where you're like, I don't know, like even the framing, you're like, there's just something.
And the casting's just so perfect. Like Mia Farrow just has that like almost like cherubic kind of look about her, you know, just this very youthful, fresh, you know. I mean, like you know, a young mom that any number of moms watching the movie could relate to, kind of a look about her. And but yeah, and then Cassavetes, he has those sinister eyes that like even when he's playing it straight, you're just like, you're a fucking scumbag. Like, what are you doing? Like, we all know. Like, there's something about him. Like, he's average looking. He's not leading man gorgeous or anything like that. He's just like an average looking guy. But there's just something wrong about his face.
It's incredible not only with that, but I think too. Oh God, speaking of back with Aliens 1 through 3. I remember when I was in New York, I saw Charles S. Dutton, and everyone was like, "Oh fuck, that's the guy from Rudy," and I was like, "Fuck that, man! That guy got fucked up by an alien."
Yeah, I love his performance in Alien
3. I remember feeling so sad when that poor bastard, like, remember he tries to climb it too, and the fucking
yeah,
he's like, well, there goes that idea.
just all falls apart like instantly.
I was pissed. I was like, are you fucking serious? No. It was devastating. I remember thinking that. I was like, and even the way that they shot that was so intense, where you just see the steam, and you know he's getting fucked up, but you can hear him
yes,
just saying badass shit.
Do you want it on your feet or you want it on your fucking knees? Begging. I ain't much for begging. Nobody ever gave me nothing.
Is that the hardest you bite, motherfucker?
I'm a defender of that movie. I know people hate it. I know Fincher hates it, and everybody. But I mean, again, like these kind of movies from your youth, like that overcomes a lot of things. Have you watched the fuller cut? I can't call it a director's cut because he didn't have anything to do with it. But they released when they did the big Alien quadrilogy set.
No, I didn't.
Oh, come over and watch it sometime.
Yeah,
it adds. It adds the movie, like it actually really fleshes some things out around their plan and kind of how things go wrong and stuff.
Really?
Yeah, and they show a different version of the, you remember the dog? Mm-hmm. I think the dog's the first one who has an alien plan, and that's kind of how things begin with. That's how the alien bursts out and it is able to move the way it does and stuff. Well, they do a different thing where it actually, I think, impregnates like a bull or something. They've got some like cow or steer or something like hanging up, and you see it like rip out of this big animal. It's really badass looking. Yeah, I mean, I know I've heard Luke complain about it a million times. You know, killing off Hicks and stuff like that. But you know, Luke's much more obsessed with things having heart. Why doesn't it have any heart? But
I'm right in the middle of both you fucker, but I love it. Like, I love watching if you two were to get into a discussion, because I'm like, oh man, I gave up on choosing a side hours ago. So I feel like drinking again. It's like watching the Super Bowl.
I don't hate Marvel movies nearly as much as I pretend that I do, just because he loves them so much.
Sometimes you're just hungry.
People are gonna miss these movies. No. All right. Jesus. We get it.
I don't know what it is though. You know, with 90s horror films, maybe it's just me, but I was talking to a friend about Joe Bob Briggs's Monster Vision.
I didn't see that one.
Oh, it was TNT. He used to host it. You gotta remember this on
yeah,
TNT.
no, I do remember that. Yeah,
Remember
okay.
that? It was, to me, that was the window into all of these different monster films because,
Yeah.
all right, now we're going to do the death list.
Oh shit, I haven't thought about that in a long time.
Yeah, one axe murder, one chainsaw to the head.
Yeah.
And like he would have his coffee, especially like Friday the 13th. They would do a whole marathon, and he would have his coffee, like his cold brews, Joe Bob Briggs, and his recliner, and they who just host, you know, the movies back when they still did that. And it was like, holy fuck, like he hosted Monster Vision. I remember being exposed to so many different good horror films and being like, man, I am invested in these stories. Like, I remember the one that I loved the most with Joe Bob Briggs was he did Halloween 2, which I loved because obviously I'm not very fast. My biggest fear, Jordan, is I can't stand to be chased.
Yeah.
Don't fucking chase me. Like I will fight on my feet. Like I will not run.
Well, all you need is somebody slower than you. That's you'll be fine.
But even like that, that's the problem. Are your cans not working? What's going on? No, that was always what like, and just the whole film is just her running from Michael Myers, and then you know that fucking mask. And again, though, I felt like maybe that's just a '70s thing because that might have been '80s, but where
yeah, I guess that would have been '80s.
You have Donald Pleasance, who just sells Dr. Loomis.
Yeah.
And I'm like, fuck, this guy he's the best part of those films.
So many of those, that era of actor started through the 70s into the 80s, started cropping up in those movies like George C. Scott,
Gregory Peck,
Gregory
and
Peck. Yeah, you saw a lot of those guys doing that. And they were you know they were paydays, like we understand. But still, like they're talented, so
and I'm
it
curious
works.
though, how much do you think a payday for that could have been? It couldn't have been massive, right?
I mean, at the time, you know, there was all that press around like Brando getting what was it, like $1 million or something to do Apocalypse Now because he was in a very relatively short amount of that movie. So I mean, at the time, it was probably for an entire feature. They were probably getting like $600,000 or something.
Damn.
I mean, I don't know. It's hard to say. And yeah, adjust for inflation, like how much money is that? Who knows?
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it was a different era of paychecks. But you know, there's kind of a pre and post era of getting paid where they started figuring agents and people started figuring out like, oh well, if we can get points on this movie, back end points, so that way if it's a huge hit, then you just keep on getting paid.
Atticus Finch, dude.
Yeah.
I mean, come on.
Yeah.
He tried to slay a child, and I was like, holy fuck.
Yeah.
It's phenomenal. And I'm like, who the fuck is genius enough to, one, all right, now, Gregory, we really just hear us out, all right? We think this movie would be fantastic.
Yeah.
And he's like, well, let me read the script. And you keep putting your hand on, you're like, but here's the thing, like, we can pay you now. Yeah. You're like a little kid with a suitcase full of money.
Yeah.
You're like, listen, you can keep the little kid too. Whatever you want. We just listen to me. This movie is gonna be fucking spectacular.
Yeah.
Okay, now go ahead, take your hand off the script. But yeah, dude, and like I said, Donald Pleasance doing that. Even Shaw in Jaws.
Yeah.
It's just like, holy fuck, this movie could get some serious people. Even Alec Guinness in Star Wars, which
I was about to mention him.
hated.
I just saw an interview that he was on Letterman in the 80s talking about that. It was a great interview. I mean, you can tell he's very much of the opinion like, I have no fucking idea why people like this movie, but I'm glad they do because goddamn, I mean, it's cashing huge checks ever since.
I was able to buy this suit.
Finally able to pay off that alimony. But then there's also the stories of the other big name, classically trained actors who were like, yeah, I turned this movie down or whatever because I just thought like, who would possibly go see this nonsense? Tons of those too. So I really think the dynamics of this paycheck started to change after Nicholson got his deal for Batman.
Yeah,
because he got paid at the time like
Wasn't
within the first year of that movie being out, it made like, I think he made like $90 million or some preposterous amount of money.
I remember there was 60 in like the first year I had heard. And then
Yeah.
when everything was all said and done, it was in like the 90s. I think.
But they sold all the toys.
Yeah,
and all
once-
that. I mean, he got a piece of every single merchandising product that came out along with Batman and Batman Returns. Like he had points on Batman Returns too, just because he was part of that franchise. So
That's fucking spectacular.
I think studios learned like, yeah, we better back down on this a little bit.
Can we kill him?
Mm-hmm.
Like, no, he's too famous.
He's always been so smart with that stuff. I don't know if you ever saw. I think his Oscar acceptance speech for Cuckoo's Nest. He thanks because there was, I think a female was the first person to ever get points on a movie, and he thanked that actress for figuring that out.
Oh my god!
Because Cuckoo's Nest was like
Yeah.
the biggest hit of the year. It was
was
kind of
gonna
crazy
say,
to think about. Like a very grown up, like depressing movie was the biggest box office hit of 1975.
God, the 70s, man. You know what's interesting, because this is what kind of brought me down that rabbit hole. I just got on streaming, and I don't know what you know about this. It's funny because this is going to get really niche, and I'll tell you when you can listen again if you're a constant listener. If you're, but this is what's interesting. Halloween. I don't know how into the Halloweens you got, but Halloween 6 had all kinds of nightmare storylines and like people dying. Obviously, Donald Pleasance died. They just released, and it took them years to do it, like years. They released another cut of it. Did you ever hear anything about this?
No.
Okay. So it basically described why Michael Myers was the way that he was. And it was like this curse, and it talked about the pagan ritual. And essentially how the film ended was that everybody was Michael's keeper. This cult was Michael's keeper. And he heard this voice that told him to kill his family. Well, they were under this curse, and it wasn't until they could relinquish the curse to somebody else. And so they gave it to Donald Pleasance.
Oh, okay.
Which, when you hear him scream at the end, it's not him dying, it's him getting that curse.
like possessed by that thing.
Put on him. But it was such a fascinating, like, that's what I loved about those films, though, is they were clearly for a niche audience, but I was like, wow, this is back when people invested in story. And so much, though, where, like, I think you got too many cooks in the kitchen.
Yeah.
With, you know...
Well, and there was one-upsmanship with it too.
Oh,
like it could
God,
never
yeah.
be like it always had to be bigger and more, a little more preposterous. And then they tried to, a lot of the time with those franchises, they always try to infuse a little too much like ham-fisted humor into it that just never quite lands right. I mean, some people like it for the schlock of it, but like
Absolutely.
it's just not. It ain't good. I didn't get super into. I never really considered myself a big horror fan until much later. Because a lot of the reason is I didn't even really look at the movies I was watching as horror films necessarily. I looked at them more as like action films. Because watching those Alien movies as a kid, those are kind of big action movies. Even though they are like the Alien and Alien 3 are both again the haunted house kind of story and things like that. Where Aliens is like a balls out like action movie.
Yeah, to me, I always saw that as an action film,
and it's great. I love it. I love it for the differences, you know, and as well as for the through line of it all. But yeah, not until much later did I really start getting deeper into horror. And, I mean, The Shining really turned things around for me big time, for sure. And The Exorcist. And, Rosemary's Baby I mentioned. Anything that has a lot of dread to it. And a lot of just, like, hopelessness, I really gravitate towards. It really speaks to me. Just like what's the point? These people are never going to be the same.
You know what fucked me up as a kid was Night of the Living Dead. And Luke and I talk about this, the Savini one, the Tom Savini one.
Oh, sure.
Really just, it was gory.
Yeah.
And it was, I mean, you talk about dread.
Yeah.
And I don't know what, like, to me, this is what makes George Romero such a genius, was casting the actors that he did, because you don't know anybody in those films, but in that same respect, it's dangerous because he can kill any of them. Then.
Yeah.
And you're kind of like, I don't know which horse to bet on.
Yeah,
like,
or anybody can emerge as the hero, you know, and you just don't know.
I love how it treats racism in the very first Night of the Living Dead, where it's just like, you can argue that the white guy's doing this, or you can argue that it's the black guys. You can argue anything you want.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't fucking matter, because the end is coming, and we're still arguing about we can't. There's power struggles within the house.
And another great thing about that is that it doesn't end with like a speech. It doesn't turn into like, in case you didn't get what we're going for here, I'm gonna have some like woke character explain it and tell everybody how terrible they are. And it's purely it's set within the confines of that movie, and it lets the events play out to speak to something bigger. It completely works. I mean, everybody knows about it and how cheap the production was and everything, and how long it took to make and all that. But like, what was it, 1968 that movie came out? I mean, my girlfriend saw it for the first time last year, and she was rattled by it. I mean, that movie's twice as old as she is, just about. I mean, and she was rattled by it. Rosemary's Baby the same way. Like, I don't think she can watch Rosemary's Baby again. Like, it fucking shook her to
Some
her core.
people can't,
Yeah.
and it makes sense to me, because especially like those, the ones that can't watch it. I love those people, because those are the ones that really do get invested in a film, and that's a beautiful thing about it. It was not Nightmare on Elm Street. It was Night of the Living Dead, and the other one was Pet Sematary. And it wasn't the film. It was the story. It was the book, yeah. Because just that concept of a fate worse than death.
Yeah.
And it was like, oh God, like, yeah, you could totally see wanting something so bad to come back that you buried it, and then when it came back, it was, what is the
what you love most is now the thing that is gonna kill you. Yeah.
So I don't think he listens to this, but we were talking about Luke's brother and how different they are.
I love his. I've never met his brother. I love his brother stories. Oh, they're so good.
And it was like, because I remember I was talking. I was like, so what? Yada yada. What do you like doing? His brothers they're just so different.
Yeah,
they're so different, but they're so the same. Like, just like, yeah. And Luke told me once, he's like, yeah, that's my brother, and he goes, he's like the Pet Cemetery version of me.
Oh my God! Wow. Yeah.
I'm sure he doesn't listen to the show, but
well, and it's not that's not even. I mean, that's not even quite an. I mean, it's a little bit of an insult, but at the same time, it's also just kind of like, there's nothing wrong with being different. It's all right.
And I just remember laughing, like, yeah, that's what it is. Like,
yeah,
because he's like you, but he's just into different shit. And I'm like, what a fucking strange conundrum this is.
Yeah, I mean, he kind of lives out in the middle of nowhere, and
fishes.
Seemingly doesn't have an opinion on anything.
LOL.
LOL. I love this. I love any of his family dynamics stories. I find them endlessly fascinating. He's so fucking funny.
They're terrifying and
oh, I mean, the amount of things I think he reveals about himself that he doesn't realize he's revealing just brings me endless pleasure. It's very, very interesting. I'm glad he does that. He calls his podcast therapeutic, and I think it has to be, because boy, do some things come out. It's great. It's funny.
Yeah, it's phenomenal. It's funny you say, especially when we talk about Night of the Living Dead, that there's no real woke character that's going to narrate everything, put like a nice little bow on it.
Right.
Because, especially now, you get a lot of it.
Yeah.
I mean, the last film that really left me kind of like, huh, was No Country for Old Men.
Mm-hmm.
Where everybody was sitting in the theater and we were just kind of like, well, I guess we got to figure our lives out now, guys.
Yeah.
And it was wonderful, though.
Yeah.
It was
very
like,
jarring.
Jesus Christ.
Very jarring the way
Yeah.
it kind of just cuts to black the way it does.
And then I woke up.
Yeah.
And just like, I
And his
remember-
wife is just staring at him too. She doesn't know what to say.
It's perfect.
Yeah.
It's so fucking perfect. And it's funny because maybe it's those dread films that leaves the question unanswered, which is nice because it's and I will say this, I watched the Oscars last night.
Mm-hmm.
So as we're recording this, the Oscars were last night. It's Monday.
I fast forwarded through most of it.
I don't blame you, but I mean, Luke and I were talking about it, but do you remember when people would thank who helped make the film?
Yeah.
And all of that shit. And then I think Joe Pesci just went up, his was like, thank you.
Yep.
And then he didn't
even go last night.
Walked away.
He didn't even show up.
Yeah, exactly.
And after watching it, you're like, yeah, I can't blame you. Like, why would you?
And it's just, we were talking about like, how amazing those awards used to be. Like Nicholson and all of that shit. But
well, they seem to really enjoy themselves. Like that, I really loved. I loved Olivia Colman's presentation this year. I thought she was very funny, and I loved her acceptance speech last year for The Favorite. I love that movie, The Favorite. I thought it was amazing. That director is fucking fascinating. The bizarre things that he comes up with is just so off-putting and hilarious. But she seemed so disarmingly happy and humbled and like just really enjoying the moment.
Yeah.
And then there's the Joaquins of the world who just really seem to be pretty intent. I don't disbelieve his earnestness, really. I mean, I disbelieve like how much he actually practices the things that he claims to, but I don't disbelieve how much he like feels. But I just it's a little exhausting to. He made a comment last night in his acceptance speech of what we do is giving a voice to the voiceless. And it's just such this highfalutin, self-aggrandizing thing that I think too many artists put on themselves as trying to convince other people that they're doing like a public service to unload some of the guilt of the fact that they're so much more wealthy and have so much more opportunities than other people. I'm not saying artists, because there are plenty of starving artists out there who have nothing. But I just mean that level of
is it guilt?
I think it's absolutely a guilt, and I think it's somewhat of a. It may not even be that. In fact, it's definitely probably not even that conscious with most of them. I think it's somewhat of a subconscious feeling of guilt where their politics and their philosophy are such where they use that as to kind of shield away this overwhelming feeling of I get paid so much money to play make-believe for a living, where other people are out there, making so little doing whatever whatever the situation is, but basically saying they all this privilege. If I acknowledge it out loud and then talk about my whatever you want to call it, the wokeness, the level of my benevolence, how much I care about all these issues, and my giving the voice to the voiceless, that helps temper this feeling of like, boy, am I getting away with something? Do you know how much fucking money Joker made? Jesus Christ!
Well, and it is, when you think about it, it is kind of an asshole thing to say. Like, if you were sitting there and he was like, listen, I can talk for Eric about being overweight, I'd be like, what?
Yeah.
Like, I have a voice, you fuck, sit down. Like, the voiceless, like, are you talking about animals or are you talking about us? You piece of shit. Like,
I told my girlfriend last night, I was like, you really start to lose the crowd when you use the word insemination in your acceptance speech. You can't come back from that. I don't know. I do think there's especially in this town, in this industry, or in whatever kind of, like, whether it's New York or LA or whatever, I do think that's a lot of what this performative brand of political, I mean, it's slacktivism what it is, because it's saying things like, oh, we're creating a dialogue. It's like, oh, well, that's just a euphemism for I didn't actually do anything, but it'd be great if you did something about it. So go talk about it, right? So yeah, I just read before I came over here that it was I should have read the whole article, but it is some of the lowest viewing numbers they've had for the Oscars in many, many years. There's only somewhere around like 23 million people watched it or something,
really?
Which is really low. And, like I said, I fast forwarded through I caught up. I was flying back from Sonoma last night and got home about like 6:45, so I was already about 2 hours behind the telecast. So I could just fast forward through it as it was going, which is great. I could just plow through all these horrible, mundane speeches, and just kind of get to some of the categories that I cared about and just see who won. Most people don't think about movies and stuff the way we just had that conversation about movies. Mm-hmm. Like that would bore the majority of human beings. Like, they don't care to go that deep with movies most of the time, right? And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. So how much do you think they're going to like getting preached to and, making, various like Oscars so white jokes and all these different things? Like, people they've got other concerns. Like, they just don't care. And you're not going to win them over by calling them assholes all the time.
Well, and it's funny because even the process of making a film is not a glorious one.
No.
That was like the funny thing. I remember even just working on one of Luke's shorts. The short film that he had written. It was just so like.
Sorry.
It was just so time consuming. I felt bad because you're holding up production with one thing if something's not working right, and I mean, to make a film is hard. Any film.
Yeah.
And it's just like, and then to make one that is good is even more hard.
Well, and the people who get to do it, who really get to do it, are of a very, very privileged circle of people who work very hard to keep everybody else out, which is hilarious because their talk of inclusivity, their talk about, caring about like the labor market and all these different things. Meanwhile, they are in a business of that they want to keep it as tight-knit a circle as possible, and they've worked hard to do that since its inception. And it's been done in various very, very corrupt ways over the years to keep anybody from getting into the inner circle. And even the process of making a movie is... a documentary won last night that was about... it's called American Factory, and I think the premise of this documentary is about organized... oops, bash the microphone. It's about...
All right, look, if you're going to get violent...
These motherfuckers! It was about organized labor, and like it's very, very... It was a pro-union type of message, basically, with this documentary. But the hilarious thing about this is the making a movie is using contract workers to make these movies. They are fired as soon as the production is over. Like, they're not employed year-round by Warner Brothers or somebody. Most of these people are essentially temp workers who don't... The ones who are unionized, like, because there are various sectors of unions in the Hollywood industry, depending on what type of job that you do. But most of these people are not at a regular job with a 401k and like health benefits and all this stuff that you would get from another kind of private company. Like, the studios go out of their way not to treat people that way. So they and that's why they probably still do, depending on what's going on with various tax codes and things like that. They, ship productions overseas or up in Canada. They're shooting things to make it look like New York and all these different things. So as much as they pretend to care about these things, they're not providing any type of work environment that they say is so important to the average American worker. And it's so patently obvious, but nobody speaks about it because, again, that would require them doing something. It would require them changing. Like, they don't actually want to have that conversation. So it's just this constant, this ring of hypocrisy, but that the point of it is constantly to keep out the people who they don't deem kind of worthy of getting into this kind of business, because it is very difficult to do. And so many people want in, and they've done a very good job of insulating themselves.
The voiceless.
That's right.
Whose voice they have taken away.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, okay. Now, this is where, as I could say this, where we can pull out the blood of the Kali. Because I used to consider myself very liberal. Extremely liberal.
A lot of people do.
Yeah. And what's funny is I really didn't know what that meant.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, what it actually still means.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it was funny because it was right around the time, not when Trump was elected, but it was probably right around the time I started doing comedy. To this day, I think my lucky stars that I do comedy, because it's given me perspective, and that more than anything, I'm like supremely grateful for. Because it's funny whenever I hear what comics get attacked for, or I hear things like that. It's funny because to me, I laugh and I'm like, fuck, I better learn how to argue against that, because I make jokes like that, or I
Sure.
I made a joke about, I was raised around all these white kids. I didn't speak Spanish, and I was afraid to get on the bus with the Mexican kids because I knew they were going to talk shit to me in Spanish. And my mom was like, "Why are you so afraid of riding that bus?" And I go, "Did you see what they did to those white kids?" And she was like, "Well, you're Mexican." And I'm like, "But I don't speak Spanish." And she's like, "Yeah?" And I'm like, "They'll fuck it. They're cobras, Mom. They'll eat their own. They don't give a shit." I was like, "What are you
That's right.
crazy?
You smell blood in the water."
Exactly. I'm a house one. Yeah. Like, oh, we're really gonna get him. Like, he drank the Kool-Aid that the white man made us like love. And I was like, but it's funny because in my head I was like, okay, yeah, there was a legitimate fear because I knew they were going to talk shit about me. I knew that they were going to fuck with me and all of that shit. And I was like, yeah, I don't want to ride that fucking bus.
Yeah.
And so, I had different perspective because they treated me like shit,
Right.
for not knowing Spanish.
You weren't Hispanic enough.
Oh no, I'm
Right.
still not, by the way.
Right.
Like, it's funny too because when I first went to West Holly, or not West Holly, when I first went to Christopher Street, I was with my then boyfriend, as it was Thomas, and I was terrified because I was in a Led Zeppelin shorts.
Oh yeah, I heard you. I remember this story.
Yeah, and it was like, fuck, and I wasn't gay enough,
Right.
and I was just like, holy fuck. And it's funny because like even now when I hear comics that are, I will say this though, they are newer, but not necessarily. Mm-hmm. But I hear them attack people that if you voted for Trump, you might as well just fucking leave the room now.
Right.
And it gets applause. It doesn't get a lot of laughs,
No.
but it gets a lot of applause.
Yeah.
And it's funny because I think that gets confused. And I think it is confused sometimes, where it's just like, okay, I was listening to Jim Norton debate, a rape culture and rape jokes and things like that. And the guy had asked the question, he said, well, should comics be allowed to say whatever they want? And both Jimmy and the feminists that he was talking to were like, that's a really stupid question.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, okay, but that's how people are trying to cut it too,
Yes.
though.
Making it as simple as possible.
It's one or the other.
Right. One or the other. Right.
And
It's
if you're
it's always
not
binary.
one, you are the other.
Yes.
And like I said,
If you're not with us, you're with them, and they are bad.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's funny too, because like I said, it gives me perspective. That's what I mean by comedy giving me perspective, in the sense that, I've been in rooms where there was one white person and they treated that white person like shit.
Right.
I mean, absolute shit. And I laughed because fuck them. No.
Plantation owning cracker asshole.
No, but it's, and I can make a joke like that and laugh, but that was the context. It was, okay, that's the joke. Other people it wasn't a joke.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay. And, I will never attack that, because it's like, well, if I attack that, then that means that I'm attacking you for trying to be funny.
Yes.
And I'm like, okay, then I'll leave it alone. Like, yeah, go ahead, make your jokes about that, and that's fine. I don't think it's funny, because I don't think you really know what the joke is yet.
Yes.
But you're attempting, and I
Sure.
understand that. But it seems like the other way around, like people calling sponsors, people calling for other people to be take them off the air, or take them off. I don't like hearing
getting
that.
their agents to drop them or whatever.
Exactly, like that.
Yeah, it's scary. I've in the I mean, I don't know. I don't think about what somebody does for a living as being any, like, I don't associate a lot of like nobility usually with somebody, what somebody chooses to do for a living. Like, just because you're a doctor or something doesn't make you morally superior to somebody who isn't one, or whatever. Like, I'm not really one of those people. Like, however you choose to make your money is your business. Really, it should be more how you conduct yourself is more important to what kind of person you are. But when it comes to like the entertainment industry and the types of jobs and careers, I've always had a really, really high respect for stand-up comedians. As much as I joke when people talk about, I've been asked a couple times, are you a stand-up? I said, no, I have too much self-worth. But I only make that, I make the joke anymore, because I'm kind of starting to feel bad, because I think, but the truth of it is, though, I have
get up and leave.
But the thing, I mean, comics themselves are constantly, they're like, oh God, I was like, why do you think I'm here? Like, nobody loved me growing up, like that kind of joke. But I admire stand-up comedians probably the most, because it's for one thing, it's focused on autonomy. It's just one person up there. They're almost like a small business unto themselves, right? Like, they're making it on their own, kind of a thing.
Yeah, they're independent contractors, most definitely. Which
I really love, and even there's some out there who like think there should be like a stand-up union or something. But like for the most part, and a lot of comics respect the oneness of it, right? It's a community of stand-ups where they all get along and all that. But like, for the most part, when it comes to their careers, it's them.
Yep. And
I respect that, and I also respect how much they have to weather in media, and just like sociopolitically, the things that they have to put up with that so many other people in the arts don't have to. Because for some fucking reason, people are so dense that, because of the accessibility of a stand-up, I think, because they're on a stage that's not that far away from you, because you're in there drinking, have a good time, and it kind of feels like they're talking to you. Or maybe you're listening to a podcast, it like almost feels like you're in the room with them, I think people have got this notion that like everything these people say is attributed to what kind of person they are. So these jokes, if I don't find those jokes funny, then that's a moral failing on their part, rather than their attempt at humor just didn't work on me.
Exactly.
Right? So they have to, for some reason, put up with that a lot more than other people do. And I do think it is that accessibility thing. I think it's the literal being close to them. Like, you're never close to Denzel Washington or DiCaprio or Meryl Streep or whatever these people. Mm-hmm. You don't have a proximity to them in the way you do with even huge stand-up comics. Like, you can get pretty close to Jerry Seinfeld if you want to. Like, that's a thing. So I think that has a lot to do with it. And what you just said is right about, if that person's trying to be funny, then that needs to be accounted for. It's when they're not really going for laughs, and they're going for claps. They're going for the back patting. They're going for like, oh yeah, like, listen to, basically seeking out agreement certainly not seeking out any disagreement, because they're literally saying, if you disagree, go fuck your mother.
Exactly.
But they're basically saying, like, I'm gonna take the temperature of this room and make sure that we all think the same way, and then we can all suck each other's dicks afterwards. That kind of thing. Like, you're not trying to be a comedian anymore. You're trying to be a lecturer, and if you want to be a lecturer, go be one.
Yeah, exactly.
But you're not being a comedian.
And you're exactly right about it. It annoys me in the sense of, okay, in films you get away with it. In films you absolutely, like, watching Malcolm X is hard in some spots, especially when he's getting indoctrinated with, how horrible white people are.
Yeah.
And, not that they did wrong, but that they still are these white devils.
Right.
Even that scene where, what the girl basically apologizes for what her ancestors did. And then, what can we do to be better? And he says nothing, and then he walks away from her.
Yeah.
That's a hard fucking scene, and for anybody to watch.
Mm-hmm.
So
well, anybody with any amount of empathy.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Where, my God, like, Jesus, fuck, that's horrible to watch.
Well, that kind of mentality has been commoditized, and it's now its own industry of everything is presented in a way of there's nothing you can do about it. It could be a racial thing where it's there, like, no matter what the system, whatever vague thing they want to call it, maybe they're talking about academia, maybe they're talking about Hollywood, or whatever thing that they're talking about, or just society in general. Of course, they talk about society as if American society is the only one. They're such a narrow-minded group. Like, they always think they're the center of the fucking universe. But the society is inherently biased in the favor of white people. That's the premise, and then they take it further beyond that and say nothing white people can do is going to help that.
Exactly.
They're just that way innately, unconsciously. They are biased, and because of that bias, they are constantly using a prejudice in some way against people of color, against some LGBTQ plus or whatever. Whatever the group is that is angry about something, they can pick a somebody out there who is their persecutor, and they just blatantly say, you can't do anything about it. You're just terrible.
Yeah.
And you just have to accept that. And that's a pretty hard line to sell. You've already sold the people who are already on your side.
Exactly.
Like, there are plenty of guilt-ridden white people who are just going to stand in line and be like, yep, that's absolutely right. I'm terrible. Tell me more about it. Like, you've got those people. You've got the people who buy into this argument. But it's not very persuasive to the people who maybe could be persuaded into, like, if your intention, because really the intention is control from a government standpoint, because this is always in aid of, like, we need a different kind of person in power kind of a thing, right? Mm-hmm. So if you're trying to persuade a certain group of people to vote a certain way, well, the only people you're persuading are the zealots that you already have. Like, you're already preaching to that choir.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you want to be persuasive, you want to bring people over your side, you could start with the premise of there's this system that through various historical atrocities, through the victimization of these people, or through the success of these people, there is a systemic bias in this certain area. You could start with that premise. The decent thing, the honest thing to do would be, like, rather than saying you're all terrible because you're a part of that system and you need to listen to us because we're not, you should instead say, how are we going to, when you say, like, well, we're just trying to have a dialogue, well, then you actually need to have the dialogue.
Exactly.
And you need to hear what those people have to say about it, and you need to be, what you don't need to do is attack them when they express a little reservation over it's like, well, I can maybe buy into the idea that, academia has systemically been biased towards wealthier white people for several generations. But I'm not totally sold on the idea that, like, if I get a scholarship, I don't deserve it because there is a black female out there who deserved it more than me, kind of a thing. It's like I know what my, but there, if somebody were to express that kind of reservation in this kind of context, they would be, called out as being like, well, of course you'd say that because you're a racist.
Absolutely.
And
Bam, that's it.
That's it. And again, if you have those people who are going to buy that and be like, yeah, you're right, I'm racist, whatever, or you're going to have people who are going to buy it and still enjoy their scholarship anyway. But so it's those people that they should be more trying to listen to and win over. And this, you could take it to the last election with, Hillary not going to Wisconsin or whatever, like that being kind of a microcosm of a greater issue of there's a whole slew of people out there who are perfectly decent, who aren't even really very political people, which that in itself is being, they're being chastised over. It's like, if you're not the right kind of political, then you're a bad person. Like, if you're not an activist in the same way I am, you're a bad person, right?
Absolutely.
But just these average people who are out there living their lives, they've been getting denigrated for a decade as being part of this gigantic problem that doesn't have any solutions. They're bigoted, whether they realize it or not, whether they admit it or not, and they're doing nothing to help out people who are disenfranchised.
And I think that one of the key words is people.
Yeah.
Because when we were talking about it, there's homeless black people, there's homeless white people it's ugly.
Yeah.
It's not one or the other. And
No.
because we were talking about,
there's a lot of veterans in that group.
Exactly, where you really have to ask that question. That's why, like I said, I absolutely adore comedy, is because it can so firmly touch a topic. I talked about the Malcolm X scene. Well, I remember Family Guy had this terrific scene where he goes, "My God, this is worse than the white dialogue in a Spike Lee movie." Do you remember that?
Yeah.
And it's like, I can't remember what the black guy asked me. He says, "Excuse me, sir, is this a..." And then the white guy just...
just foaming at the mouth and clawing at the air and stuff. Yeah. Well, that's my struggle with Spike. I don't think of Spike Lee as much of a filmmaker. There's been a couple of movies I've liked more than others. Black Klansman took such a turn by the end. He had such a engaging story going. And again, because I'm a racist, of course, right? By the end, I hated it because he took it in this direction of... he changed so much about... I found that the actual story so compelling, and he just took so much of the facts out of it.
The actual story was pretty fucking...
Yeah, and he completely manipulated it to fit this agenda that he has, and he's free to have it, for God's sakes. But, of course, he's constantly acting like he's some kind of like underdog or something out there, and he just isn't. Like, by definition, he isn't. I mean, look at the success that man has had. It goes from being a thoughtful, even provocative piece of filmmaking and then it segues into this lecture where it loses all the subtlety that it had. It just beats you over the head with this. Again, it's an agenda. It's not a bias, it's an agenda. Mm-hmm. Like, there's something very specific behind it where they're trying to achieve something with this. They're not just merely unconsciously biased, they are consciously feeding an agenda. And that agenda is continuously, just from I'll climb a soapbox for a second, but it's on a very macro level. When you get people who are so divisive and they segregate people into these specific camps, and some of these camps are good and some of these camps are bad, what they're actually doing is they're creating this system where they're removing the individual from it. Mm-hmm. The individual circumstance, the individual traits of that person are irrelevant, so they're removing your autonomy and putting you into a group, and then it becomes about this collective. I mean, that's the communist kind of terms, right? It's the individual versus the collective, where if the individual is wrong and the collective is right, that kind of thing. That's organized labor. Labor is based around it. The collective is the good. The individual is the one who's stealing your money and all the greed and all those things. So there's somebody like me who sees the atrocities over this last century that have been committed in the name of the collective, where I'm politically, philosophically, whatever, I'm always in favor of the individual's rights, and that's an individual of any race or any sexuality or any religion of any kind. It's the maximum amount of freedom and the maximum amount of good that can be done is by focusing on an individual's rights, not the collectives.
And it is up to the individual too, because I think education is important too, because I'll be honest, I was nervous to meet you because I didn't know exactly what your politics were. I didn't care to look. That's a problem, though. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like that's a huge issue, and I didn't know, and it's a strange kind of condition to be under, because I came from the theater, where you would not believe some of the shit that gets just. Okay, there's one agenda, and we're right. But the odd thing about it was we weren't actively trying to shut down thought, because like I used to love the playwright Martin McDonough, and I loved beautiful rhythm in the text, and that's really what I went for. I should say, me personally, because that's what I said. That's why I loved Shakespeare. I loved the questions that those plays asked in terms of power, and is there power struggles, and even the Jew of Malta, and how that became Merchant of Venice. And then you look at the Christians really didn't learn anything by the end of that play,
Right.
And that's kind of what's so hilarious about it is okay, so we're celebrating the fact that the Christians kind of got away with one.
Right.
Just like, okay. How much mercy was Shylock shown? It's like, oh, none. We got all your shit now.
Right.
Yeah, good luck. And it's like, fuck. I never realized how funny it was, or I never realized how funny Richard III was, in the fact that he's trying to kill all these people to get to the throne.
Yeah.
There's a line in that play where he literally says, such sweet children, 'tis oft said, sweet children do not live long.
Yeah, that's right.
And it's hilarious.
Yeah.
You're like, holy shit.
Yeah.
And the performance I saw was great. It was Mark Rylance. And he looked at the audience and he winked.
Yeah.
And everybody was like, Jesus Christ.
It's grim.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It was so dark, but it was one of those things where you're laughing until you're not laughing. But that's what really good theater used to do, was it made a strong case for both questions.
Yeah.
If you look at even the Greeks, Antigone, Antigone was, her brother was for the state, the other brother was a rebel. They fought and they killed each other. Well, they said, okay, the brother that fought for the state will be buried on holy ground. The other brother, put him out where the fucking wolves can get him. And she said, I can't do that. I got to bury him in holy ground. Well, if you do that, we'll kill you. Fuck you. I'm going to do it anyways because I serve a higher law. Okay. It asks such a profound question. Okay, what law do you really follow? Do you follow the state law? Do you follow God's law?
Right.
What is fair? What is not fair? Is there a better way to handle this? What does it say about, tragic heroes? What makes a tragic hero?
Yeah.
And that was good theater. Today, I don't know, man.
I
I
don't
feel
know
like
if
we're
it's
not asking the questions as honestly as we used. I feel like we're asking loaded questions now.
Well, people already have the conclusion, so they're asking questions to try to get the answers that they want to support their conclusion, right? They're not really asking. I mean, it is what it is bad science. It's the opposite of what you're supposed to do. You can start with a hypothesis, but you can't do a series of experiments that are going to support your hypothesis. Your series of testing this needs to be neutral, and then to see if your hypothesis is correct. And I think people have a tendency, you mentioned earlier, it's like it's one or the other. I think people have and I really do mean all, this is not a really not ever speaking about this in like a Democrat versus Republican kind of format at all. This is human beings in general have a horrible tendency to look at things in a binary way, and rather than seeing the nuance of like, this choice is right, this choice is wrong. Well, the truth of the matter is a lot of different things can happen if you choose one or the other, but you could open yourself to the idea that you don't have to choose either one. And that's definitely a point that I reached, and you were talking about like politically speaking. I'm not party registered. I never have been. And I'm not a part of it is though, again, this goes back to my, really adhering to the idea of the individual and autonomy. I'm just not a joiner. I never have been. I don't like being part of anything. I don't like brotherhood. I don't like camaraderie. I don't like uniforms or chants or any amount of fucking like standing in line. I just don't like it. I don't want any part of it. And that's the reason why, like I said, I wasn't raised religious, but that's why I didn't find religion either, is because religion and the government have gone hand in hand so closely throughout each history. And they continue to into a lot of degrees, but both of them are reliant upon the fact that there are people who are superior to you, and you need to hand over your rights in some way to make sure that they can keep things running smoothly. And I think that's bullshit. There's not anybody. Isn't it convenient that whether it was a religious monarchy running things or whether it was a government running things, they all seem to be doing really, really well. I don't know how that worked out. But goddamn, they say that's a hell of a castle that guy's got. I wonder how that happened. Well, he must know what he's doing.
Jordan, quit looking at that castle. We got pigs to shit shovel.
Yeah, when I get done shoveling it, they take my money and bring it up to that big castle. But I'm the one who shoveled that stuff. Burn them at the stake.
Jordan, quit talking. They're gonna put your hood on now. All right, you get that noose on there. Nice and tight. All right.
Any last words?
Yes.
Snap. That's all right. It fucking freaks me out. Just listen to the way people talk, just in casual conversation, like just how willingly people are able to just kind of give over any responsibility they might have to somebody else in any number of circumstances. People are so willing for other people to make their decisions for them, and it's just fucking. It's so creepy listening to. I listen to really like pious Christian guys talk about their relationship with the Lord and stuff, and it's just like you're letting this dude like boss you around and like dictate your relationship with your wife, like you're just some cuck, like what, like Jesus is like laying out your lady for you, and I don't know, it's just things like that, or the flip side of some like diehard progressive who just want they claim they're like, oh, the system's keeping people down, man. Let's give more power to the system to help these other people out. It doesn't make any sense, and it's completely backwards.
What's funny is like when we talk about cancel culture is it doesn't come as it certainly does come blatantly too, but I think they're getting smarter in the sense of they're not just asking for something to be canceled. They're starting to evolve into this. Well, no, I mean, let's really talk about this, but it's no conversation.
No,
because very rarely, I think that they're starting to realize certain people, if you ask for something to be canceled, people are going to be like, that's a little harsh,
right?
But in some respects, they're coming after them and saying like, okay, well. Okay, if it's in a comedy club, though, why are they trying to bag up your phone? Is it so they can say these certain things?
Yes.
And, okay, your club is promoting rape jokes.
Right.
And it's just like, okay, no. They're not asking for anybody to be canceled. They're not asking in those words because I think they understand that's a little self-serving.
Oh, extremely.
And so what is starting to go on now is like, well, how do you react to employees that are not being cared for properly? Or do they have enough security to
Are people safe?
Exactly.
Because then that changes into that moral issue again, where if you disagree with them, if you don't if you're not acting in a certain way, your employees or your patrons are unsafe.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so that's what I mean by the narrative has gotten smart in terms of how to make a good argument for this. It's like,
well, it's a flimsy argument because it doesn't really stand up to criticism, but they've set up the argument in a way where they can not have any criticism because they never actually have that dialogue or conversation. Again, they're not actually open to the debate. They've made the decision, and then so they've already set the standards. Like, well, the patriarchy's there, nothing you can do about it, and conversation over kind of thing. So when you start from a place where you can't argue against you need to be able to have an honest debate. But both parties need to agree there's sort of a starting point where we're going to agree that some things are true and some things aren't. But but at the very least, let's agree that this is open for debate. When the other side goes, nope, you're dumb. You're dumb. It's not open for debate. You're dumb. The things you say are dumb. And then it's like, and then when you try to counter that in some way, it's like, well, that's no. Like there is a rational argument against what you're talking about. And then they'll come at it back. I've heard people say like, "Oh, so you just want to be able to yell the N-word whenever you want?" Oh, and they take it to the most extreme kind of cases, depending on the case. That's usually what it is in the case of comedy. Oh, so you want to yell racist things?
Why are comics so obsessed with saying the N-word? And it's like,
yes.
But the thing is it's an exhausting conversation to have because it's not a conversation. It's you justifying it.
Yeah.
Because here's the bottom line.
It's you farming for confirmation from other people. It's the only thing you're doing. And any dissent is a shot down.
And what's hilarious about it is comedy is, and this is what makes me laugh about arguments, and especially why comedy is so terrific, is the more you outlaw a topic, the more that you really say, this is sacred, do not touch this.
Right.
Oh, good.
Yeah. No, I agree. I mean, that's how I feel about like any time. Like I hate like any kind of like traditional like it's like, oh, don't trample on this. Like this is such an important like ritual that we go through or do. Like that's instantly something that I want to like poke holes in and fuck with, because it's like your piety, your reverence for something means nothing to me. It's important to you, and that's lovely, but it doesn't have to be important to anybody else. And no one gets to dictate to me which things I can and can't have respect for.
And that's, to me, that's where comedy really excels. It is just brilliant in the sense of like, when oh God. It's funny because I don't want to burn anybody's material now, but I'll do this. Richard Pryor had a joke, and it was about the old
That's
man.
That's not the kind of burning he's worried about.
I know. It was a mudbone, and he used to sit on the porch, and he said, "Yeah, I know Jesus." And that's how old the guy was. He said, "No, that's for real. I remember when the boy got killed." And I said, boy, don't you go down there fucking with them Jews without no money. And I mean, it's a famous bit.
Yeah.
It's a hilarious bit, but that's, he had that one bit too about when the theater group went to prison, and he said, we'd like to do a theater piece for you tonight. It's about a young girl that falls in love with a slave, and they go, "All right, go ahead and turn the lights back on." They go, "Yeah, we're not gonna show that." And he goes, "Oh, don't worry, the and he says the N-word gets killed, and they go, "Oh, okay, go ahead and drop the lights."
Well, I like really good satire is so good at convincing people that it's earnest and like not making a joke and not making fun. So like it convinces people that they're like, oh, they're like, yeah, I agree with that. It turns out they're just being made fun of the entire time. Yeah. Like I love watching a zealot get tricked into thinking that like somebody is supporting what they're doing, and then it turns out it's like, oh no, you're actually they're calling you an asshole, and it took you a long time to figure it out, and now you feel really silly, and that's hilarious to me. So any time I don't like being cruel for the sake of being cruel. I like being cruel to people who really are just so clueless and so like they're just so in their own little box of like self-righteousness. Like there's nothing better than like making that person feel just miserable about themselves. Like it's just because they deserve it. You don't get to walk through life just assuming that everybody else is just going to like tiptoe around you.
Yeah.
Because that is how you get zealots into power when you do those kinds of things. That's how you end up with these
so self-righteous.
It's
Like, you know, we've talked about. It's fun because I want to name names just because I don't want to give them the fucking airtime. But you know, people that like the great Gnome Dwarman gets attacked on the regular, and it's just when he has created a place. You know, that comedy
created
cellar
opportunities.
Is fucking spectacular.
Yeah.
It's, you know, that place is responsible for so much comedy and so much of the influence, you know, and you could say the same thing about the Comedy Store is just for its purity in comedy, and especially in stand-up, is it is just so, I don't know, I always stick up for it, but I don't have to because I don't need to. But.
Well, and Noam deserves credit, but I mean, a lot of credit also goes to a lot of the comedians keeping it that way.
True.
As too, right? I mean, there are a lot of, I mean, there are disparate styles of comedy come through there, like, and you know, whatever you think about them individually as comics, whether you think they're funny or not. I think majority of them all have a real respect and understanding for what they're doing. That the point of it, and really emphasizing that the joke is the most important thing, not the ideology, right? It's that the humor is king, and you know, Noam definitely understands that from listening to him talk about it. And when you listen to really any great comedian, like that is what they care most about. They don't care about each other's politics. I mean, some of them do, but yeah, but for the most part, most of these guys are about the mutual understanding of like, we're up there, we know how hard it is to get a laugh. We all started out in a similar place, and now look at where we are. Like this is amazing. It's an amazing thing to be able to do that. And so trying to keep out these whatever you want it, they call them, they call themselves activists. So sometimes they call themselves journalists, but then you push them like, oh well, really, I'm an opinion, I'm an editorial, you know, whatever. Like they're not journalists. I'm technically, by definition, I'm a journalist because I have a piece of paper that says
Absolutely.
I am. But like, I mean, I understand. Like there are certain. To be a journalist, there are certain rules and ethics that you have to follow to be a journalist, and most people aren't nowadays. They wonder why they're not getting paid for their work. It's because you do shoddy work. You're not doing journalist. You're not doing. There's no integrity along with the kind of writing you're doing and stuff. And you surely have an agenda, and whether you want to call it, you know, going for clicks or whatever. And they're just trying to create these brands for themselves. And yeah, they are trying to cancel people. They are trying to ruin careers. They are trying to take things away because that will give them their. Maybe that'll be enough momentum for them to get a book deal or something, right? Nobody will probably buy it, but you know, the days of getting advances are over. By the way, in case any of you fucking people are listening, like you're not getting dick for your book if you're writing one. Like unless that thing sells, you ain't getting any money. So it's very insidious what they're trying to do, and it is selfish. It is not for any kind of greater good. They might think it is, and I think I told you this to you the other week. I'm very tired of listening to the excuse of, well, they had good intentions. They were well-intentioned people. It was of the best intentions. I read the LA Times falling over themselves, talking about the well-intentioned Democrats that have been running the city for the past 20 years. And because the LA Times has been writing every single week about the rampant homeless problem here that's absolutely sickening for an American major city to be experiencing. Nowhere in there are they calling out the parties affiliated with who were in power during the situation when it's been happening. And again, I'm not a registered Republican. I do not consider myself one at all. I mean, again, there are people who, just because I'm to the right of Chairman Mao, they think I'm a Nazi. But like I don't, you know, those people can't be reasoned with. They can't be talked to.
Yeah.
So, you know, the liberal LA Times, they're bending over backwards to try to make excuses for the way things have been, while also calling for a solution. But meanwhile, the types of policies and the types of people that they've supported for all this time have created this situation. Mm-hmm. Absolutely no self-reflection. They blame. It's like, well, we were, whoever was well-intentioned, like we all had the best motivations. It's just a shame things ended up this way. No, you did what you did, and now the things are the way they are because of that. That's what happened here. This was not incidental. Like this happened for a reason.
So, as a guy that's attracted to the more dour stories, though, mm-hmm. how do you feel about being viewed as, I don't want to say Republican, but to the right of that? Does it bother you, or did it ever?
No, I mean there was even probably a time where not a very long time, but there was like I'm talking like going way back. I mean unfortunately have been unnaturally mature from a very young age. So like probably there was a time in like high school where I would have maybe considered myself conservative. Never have considered myself a Republican, certainly. But by the time I got done with high school, I mentioned before, I'm not religious, so I was certainly never embraced like the religious right or anything like that. Mm-hmm. But I did consider myself conservative in a lot of ways because I looked at them as a smaller government kind of ideology, which is true. The problem is that with the conservative ideologies, they get to a point where, they're for smaller centralized government, but they really lean into giving power to the local governments, and that really is not really helping anything anymore.
Yeah.
I mean, it's maybe the lesser of two evils, but it ain't that much lesser. So that never really appealed to me as I got older and started looking at things more. And the farther things go along, I mean, yeah, there are some people who just purely look at the world, again, through their very narrow lens of the American politics of like it's either liberal versus conservative, Democrat versus Republican. And again, I don't fit enough of those molds to call myself any of those things. And I try to look at it from a more ethical and philosophical viewpoint of like what is the maximum freedom that we can get, and we can't get that with either of those two ideologies in power, in my opinion. And
so what do you do?
Well, you don't have to choose anything. Is the most important thing is you really have to look at every issue individually, to the point. I mean, really individually, really granularly. And I'm telling you right now, it's fucking exhausting.
I was gonna
the
say,
amount of work it fucking takes
be,
is exhausting. And I'm not. This is not to pat myself on the back. Like I'm not perfect. I don't spend like every waking moment like thinking about this stuff. But I spend a lot of time thinking about it though, and I try to read a lot of different people, and I try to go to a lot of different places to find out information about things. Some that I thought I knew a lot about, and some that I know I don't know a lot about at all. I mean, in the last couple of years, I've changed my position on capital punishment. Like I'm no longer in favor of capital punishment, which would be considered, a very
fun
kind of right wing, a job I would like to have. People tell me like, "Who are you to judge?" I'm like, "Well, I don't know. I'm pretty great, so give me the fucking axe."
The
like,
guy
I don't know.
no, I'm not judging him. I'm pulling the lever. Boss told me to pull this lever. I pull this lever.
Somebody needs to do it, and frankly, I trust myself more than anybody else. So yeah, fucking, I'll hang on that switch a while. Spark it up. But because it was antithetical to so many other beliefs I held. If I don't want to place my own Second Amendment rights or my First Amendment rights in the hands of the government, if I don't believe my government respects my Fourth and Fifth Amendment rights, whatever the situation is, how am I going to trust my government to make a decision whether or not somebody needs to be executed over a crime they committed? I am morally in favor of killing people.
Yes,
absolutely. Because there are some people who are not. There's some dyed in the wool right wing Christians who are very anti capital punishment because they believe that that's God's job, right? Mm-hmm. That human beings should not be making that kind of moral judgment over whether or not somebody should die. I'm fully confident in myself to make the moral judgment over whether somebody should die or not.
And I think that's a species thing, to be honest, because I remember talking with a friend who was like, even if we didn't have an eye for an eye, tooth for tooth, if people didn't believe that, there would still be a very legitimate reason to kill somebody in a society. And what we said is, if you had a group of cavemen, and one of them kept killing everybody else in that little hut that they had, they'd say, you know what? We gotta get rid of him.
Yeah.
They would because it's just a survival thing.
Right.
This person does not fit the mold of what we're trying to do.
Sure.
We can't count on this guy for the hunt. He's not helping us gather food.
Right.
He's hurting us.
Well,
We gotta get rid of him.
Although technically he's giving you less mouths to feed, so that's something. Yeah, I mean, I really had a kind of a reckoning over that. The more I got deep into thinking about that circumstance, it's just like, as much as I believe there are some people who don't deserve to live anymore, I can't rely on my government to make that decision. And so I got away from that. I don't know. I don't know why. Again, it kind of goes back to people's willingness to just give over their autonomy and their decision making. It's much easier to just pick a team and then they make the decisions for you, and then all you need to do is just parrot their talking points, and then you don't have to think about anything. You don't have to read anything new. You don't have to listen to interesting people. And there are a lot of interesting left-wing people who I go back to and I read and I admire. And there are a lot of interesting right-wing people that I admire. One of the people politically that I follow and really pay attention to what they have to say and they write about is a devout anarchist. I find myself getting closer and closer to that kind of political ideology than anything else. And people think about anarchy as being like, dumb college kids like throwing Molotov cocktails or something. Like, that's not what an anarchist is. A political anarchist, in the sense that like we need to remove power from these institutions because all they're doing is restricting individual prosperity and freedom. So I don't know. Like, most people actually don't want to know. Like, they think they do when they ask the question, but it turns out they actually don't want to have a conversation. But I generally say that I'm libertarian leaning. Really? But for the most part, I don't really strictly identify with any particular group. But then again, that goes back to my aversion to groups. Like, I've never called myself an atheist either. Like, I'm a lowercase atheist in the sense that I don't believe in a God, but I'm not a uppercase going to meetings talking about these dumb Bible beating hicks, and how much more superior I am to them.
George Carlin said groups are fun until they start wearing hats. That's when it's time to leave.
I refuse to. I'm not kidding. I was probably like 6 years old. I refused to join the Boy Scouts because I'm not putting on that fucking shorts and that tie. I probably didn't say fucking, but it's like I looked at their uniforms. I was just like, ugh, I gotta go march around with these losers.
Sir, Bowers just sold all his stuff and kept the money. Son of a bitch.
He went over to the Brownies and stole all their cookies, and he's hawking them door to door.
Oh, dude, I could literally talk to you forever, but I'm gonna have you back because absolutely, I think one, your just perception of films, I absolutely love it. Were you excited with Best Picture?
I was very happy for Parasite, and I think it's a legitimately great movie. I think it is going to be a movie that's going to be talked about for a very long time. Like, I don't think this is a passing kind of film that's going to be forgotten. I think Parasite is an exceptional movie. This could be a whole other podcast, so we won't go. Let's not get into it too much. But like I've been really enjoying the very woke, the very privileged who have been reviewing this movie and talking about the ethos of the film and like what it represents and all these different things. Because I definitely have a different kind of take on it. Like, I don't think it's this. It's definitely a class warfare film, but I don't think it presents the conclusion that they all want it to exactly. Like, I think it's a very ambiguous, thought-provoking movie, whereas, again, I think a lot of people are taking it and running with it.
Which is why it's great.
Exactly, and I think I really do feel it's a great movie. Lists are arbitrary, choices are arbitrary. I didn't end up picking it as my number one favorite of the year, but I mean, I really could have picked a handful of movies this year as my favorite. Parasite is brilliant, and Uncut Gems, I think, is brilliant. I can't think of a more thrilling movie that I've seen in recent memory. Like, it's just, I absolutely loved it. I'm a Tarantino devotee to the end, so I think Once Upon a Time in Hollywood was amazing.
Yeah.
I think The Irishman is going to be one of those movies that could be talked about for a very long time too. I think The Irishman is remarkable. I ain't saying it's not long.
But I love the joke they made last night where they said, I love the first season.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, but you know what? It harkens back to the type of movie where you let it wash over you over a period of time. Where those movies aren't kind of made. If you don't want to sit through it, like, okay, like, that's fine. I don't give a fuck, but like, whatever. But if you're willing to immerse yourself in that kind of thing for that amount of time, like that's a different kind of movie going experience.
Exactly.
And I think the praise that it's received is totally valid.
Jordan Bowers, thank you for hanging out with me, man. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. It's generous of you.
Absolutely. Social media, where can people follow you? Or do you want them following you?
I mean, if they want.
Tens of people are going to be listening to this.
Well, I have tens of followers, so you'll be in good company. I think I'm at Instagram and Twitter. I think I'm Cine Jordan, CineJordan. I think my Instagram might be like locked or something, but if you add me, I'll
absolutely, and I'll tag you on
or
the
whatever.
post
But
too,
if you want to follow me on Twitter, I don't tweet a ton. I do a lot of retweeting more than anything. I like following comedians. I like following funny, just kind of like provocative news people and stuff.
You're fun on Twitter. You are.
Thank you.
I love it. All right, thank you, buddy. Alrighty, so that is Jordan. See, I told you, he's great, isn't he? One more time, it is CineJordan. Give him a follow, write him a message, give him some love, whatever you gotta do. That's the end of this episode. We'll catch you next time. Until then, take care, guys.
Kick and swing and I put Zeppelin